Well, hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of the Therapy Show. I am so thrilled to have Dr. David Hall here on the podcast this week. Welcome, David. It's so awesome to have you.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah.
I want to, I came across you years ago, and I actually, this, but the audience maybe doesn't, but like I include an interview with you as a part of a course I teach because I thought it was so, I honestly, when I heard about the therapy show and what you were doing with pod courses, I thought that's such a great idea.
Well, thanks.
And it was one of those things, it's a good idea when you're a little jealous, when you think like, I didn't think of that first.
Oh, oh my gosh. Well, it's so funny that, well, first of all, thank you so much for the kind words. But when I found out that you had put me in your course, I couldn't believe it. I was like, David Hall, Psych Maven? Oh my gosh. Like I was blushing. I couldn't believe it. So I am just grateful to know you, to have you in my world, and really, really enjoyed getting to know you. And yeah.
Likewise.
Well, and I also have to be honest, like I didn't come up with the pod course thing. I don't know if I've shared this before. I know I've shared it maybe on
Yeah.
the podcast, but so a friend of mine, local to me, is
Mhm.
I don't want to get it wrong. She is a speech pathologist,
Mm.
and she is the one that, I mean, I found out she was doing pod courses and she was getting them credentialed through her, governing body. And I don't think she's trademarked that name. So I kind of
No, I
stole it
mean,
from her.
it'd be a
Yeah.
hard one to trademark. It's
Yeah.
really hard to get trademarks,
Yeah.
but no, it's to, you're the first one, I guess, in the mental health space, but
Mm.
I'll share with you one of my favorite quotes by Mark Twain.
Okay.
Creativity is just undetected plagiarism.
I love Mark Twain.
And it's just
Yeah.
there are a few ideas that are truly new, but
Yeah. True.
it was at least I had not come across it before, so that was super cool. But yes, I am super happy to be here, super happy to for us to be talking today.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you also have a podcast that you do with our friend, also in the Slight Craft Network, James Marlin. So you got a lot of
Yeah.
things going on. But could you share with our listeners, like, for those of you who don't know David Hall, who are you and how did you get here?
That is a great question. So I will try to give it as concisely as possible. So again, my name is David Hall. I have my doctorate in psychology. I'm licensed as a marriage and family therapist and a professional counselor in the state of Tennessee, where I live and work, where I'm from. I am the co-owner of a group counseling practice with my wife, who's an LPC as well, Haven Counseling Center in Knoxville, Tennessee. We uh, have at the time, I think we have about like 14, 15 therapists. It fluctuates.
Mhm.
And so that's where I am during the day a lot of the time. But I'm also the coordinator uh, and one of the main teachers for a group called Psych Maven. We provide approved continuing education and business career development resources for mental health professionals. Our tagline for Psych Maven is all things helpful in mental health. And I've been a therapist for, at the time of recording, a little over 15 years. I love the work, but I got into creating seminars, workshops, continuing education things uh, about pretty early in my career. And for me, part of my journey in that was I was building my young career as a therapist, like the work, but I'm very extroverted, and true therapy is a pretty introverted task. It's a lot of one-on-one, and the people I know that love that and kind of just that typically are more introverted types. But if you're more extroverted, you need different sort of stimuli.
Mhm.
I've discovered. And as much as I love the work of therapy, I wanted other outlets, other things to do. And I was very privileged and blessed early in my career to develop a relationship with a therapist named Bill O'Hanlon, who's somebody I work with to this day. He provides courses through Psych Maven with us.
Mhm.
And Bill is just, I came across him because I read this article that he had written for Family Therapy magazine that had come out in the end of 2009. And it was called My Indiana Jones Life as an Entrepreneurial Therapist. And I read this article, and in it, Bill was talking about how he was traveling the world, leading workshops and writing books, and that's how he was making most of his living. And I thought, I want to be him. When I grow up, I want to be Bill. And uh, and so I thought, well, I want to figure out how to do workshops and how to do things, but I couldn't. I wasn't very hireable at the time. I was pretty young and have a full license yet. I'm still working towards independent licensure. Hadn't finished my doctorate yet. Hadn't written a book. So it was hard to get hired by Pessy and kind of the big name sorts of things. So I started my own thing. My first thing, it was called the Narrative Institute, because I wrote and taught a lot on narrative therapy. And so I started that in 2011, and that was me figuring out how to create continuing education and making money off that. And so I had this in-person CE business I did for years, where I would travel. I would, go to places like Charlotte and Atlanta and Tampa and Dallas, and I did some stuff in the UK, but a lot of stuff was self-sponsored, where I travel and rent out hotel space is what I used to do, because that's where, when I went to CE stuff, that's where it was. I don't do that anymore. It's a secret. It's too expensive. You
Hmm.
can get you can get a much better price doing it otherwise. And yeah, so I did that for years. I started putting things online in 2019, which was a good year to start putting things online, because in 2020, a lot of people were looking for online stuff.
Hmm.
And 2019 is also when Psych Maven was launched, and as a different platform for continuing education. So yeah, so I do quite a bit of that. We have, I can't remember how many offerings or courses that we do at this point, with a lot of different teachers, and I kind of operate as the coordinator of that, of approving teaching and managing the continuing education approval process, which is complex. It's people ask me if it's hard, and I'm sure you get that question, Lisa.
Yeah.
Is it hard? And here's what I tell people. I go, it's probably not as hard as you think. It's not necessarily simple.
Right.
It's just a lot of paperwork. But
Hmm.
if you're willing to kind of do it and learn it,
Hmm.
it's not, it's not magical. A
Right.
lot of people can figure it out. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's what I do.
Yeah. So it's funny. Our CE, well, it sounds like you were doing the in-person events way before I was doing anything online, but my online journey began in
Mhm.
2019 with starting, well, I guess really in 2018 was when I had the idea, and then starting the podcast. And I love how you said that you did this because you needed a way to let your extrovert self out.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have thought of that. That's really cool self-awareness that you had.
Well, I benefited from good modeling, and
Hmm.
I think part of, for anyone who's listening, who's thinking about whatever it is they're currently doing or imagining doing, some of it is just about what's our own creativity and expression and what's fun for us.
Right.
But it's funny, the more I do this, the more I think it's important in the sense of representation. And here's what I mean by that.
Hmm.
So much what helps in the developmental journey for other therapists is, who do they see in front of them doing different things? And that really opens up the realm of what feels possible.
Right.
And so you discovering things about yourself can be really fun for you,
Hmm.
but it could also be super empowering for other people.
Hmm.
So whatever you're considering, whoever you are, and whatever you're considering in your particular space, I would encourage you to really consider it, not just for your own sake, but who might be watching you.
That's a really good point. And we could probably do a whole podcast episode just on
Yeah.
that. But we want to talk about some CEO
Yeah.
ideas today. And that was such a cool title that you or we came up with before we hit
Yeah.
record, the CEO blueprint. And we're not quite sure where this is going to go because we both have our own blueprints or paths to how we got here. But I know one of the things that we wanted to talk about was, if what have you learned over
Mhm.
becoming the CE maven that you are, David? Like, what do you
Yeah.
feel like have been some of your biggest lessons, I guess, over the past couple of years?
Mhm. Um, oh, so many.
Mhm.
I think, even I'll talk about kind of what it was in starting things in person, the things I learned there, and then in a lot of ways that was a completely different business than going online. And uh, I was very um, a lot of things worked out well for me early on in the business, which was a double-edged sword,
Mhm.
because some of my larger business failures came from early success, and thought like, oh yeah, this will be great. This
Mhm.
this people just show up. And I'll give you an example of an early success. It was one of my first big self-sponsored things out of town. I was doing things pretty close to where I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, but I put out a new training on social media and youth development. And it was, I I decided to do an event in Atlanta. This was in 2014. And I did this big postcard mailing. I use a list broker, and for those who aren't familiar, a list broker is somebody who will find mailing addresses for you within certain parameters. And there's this list broker company I use, Ken and Tony up in Long Island. It's cyclist marketing, but they specialize in mental health professional mailing lists. And so I got a list from them. I did a massive postcard mailing in the Atlanta area of like 5,000 people. And I got almost a 2% sign up rate on my or my postcard mailing, which is really good, really high. So I had, pushing up towards like 100 people come to my event. And this was 100 people that had never heard of me before, that had never, and they came and paid money to do this day-long CE thing for me. And I made several $1,000s in profit for that day. And that was awesome. But then I had other times where it didn't work out as well. And then, I lost money on events. And one of the things I learned in that is I got really good when your profit margins shrink in certain events or you don't know exactly how it's going to work out. I got really good at figuring out how to manage cost.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said at the beginning, I used to rent out hotel ballroom space because that's what other people did.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a really smart thing to do, just to let you know. Like it can be fine, but it's not very cost efficient. It's really expensive. Oftentimes you have to use their own catering, which is so expensive. I pay $18 a head for a continental breakfast, the most continental breakfast, like bad bagels and orange juice, and that's it. And so I've learned like how to find other spaces that are much more affordable. And when I was doing in-person events, I realized that to manage my fixed costs as much as possible allowed the profit to be really high. And when your profit margins are better, you don't necessarily have to have these massive events
Mm-hmm.
to make it work. And so that's a big lesson what I learned in person. And then when I started doing things online, I thought it would just be like, oh, I'm just put something out into the internet and all these people are going to show up and pay me money. And I don't even have to work at it. It just has to exist. And that is not true.
Mm-hmm.
But I've learned of that, how to create like a sales process, how to create things that are really valuable for people. Anyway, but I guess the things I've learned is that it's easy to spend money.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's, and I used to tell myself in business in general, I used to think of the field of dreams line, if you build it, they will come. That's usually not true, just to let you know.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
just to let you know. It's if you build it and they know about it and it's a good thing and they like
Right.
it,
Right.
then they'll
Then they will
come.
come. Yeah. I was gonna say
Then they'll come.
we have to change that saying a little bit. You
Yeah,
gotta
you have
add
to
on
make it
to
a
it.
little longer.
Yeah.
And but then, if so, that's one thing. But then I've really become a big fan of be ready to pivot,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know what it was like for you, Lisa, and even how much things may have even changed when COVID happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because anyone that was teaching things online in any sort,
Mm-hmm.
COVID radically changed within just a few weeks of, you know, people downloading things. And, I know so many people that did podcasts that all of a sudden their download rate went way up during
Mm-hmm.
podcasts because people were home and
Yeah.
doing things more. So anyway, those are some of my big lessons, and there are plenty
Yeah.
more. But what have you learned? What are the
Oh.
things that since 2018, since the idea to 5 years on? What
So
have been?
similar to you with yes, this idea. If I wasn't naive enough to think if I built it, they would come. I knew that
I
it would.
was.
Yeah, I knew that it was going to take a lot of consistency of effort, a lot of at first I thought social media posting, but I also knew deep down and in the back of my mind, I had to build an email list.
Mm,
And so I knew going into it that that was even in my mind more important than social media. I knew that my numbers for my show had to go up so people would know that I exist.
mm,
Um, but I'm very patient.
mm,
I'm as long as I am being consistent and taking intentional action, I knew that it would all come together. But also,
mm,
like you, ready to pivot if need be. If I got into this and realized this just wasn't, for whatever reason, wasn't going to work out, whether that be with COVID, I just was burning out because I was home with my kids. They were doing
mm,
school. I was working. I just didn't have the bandwidth to do, but so many pod courses over that time, as well as keep up with the podcast. I really
Mhm.
kind of I lost steam for that. And I actually kind of almost
Mhm.
stopped the podcast over COVID.
Mhm.
And, then I also would have like shiny object syndrome because I thought, well, maybe this will be quicker and faster
Mhm.
to creating the extra stream of revenue that I really wanted to have for us. But I also knew that it was shiny object syndrome, but yet I also wanted to try it. So I go down that path just like anybody else. And, looking back, my husband said something to me actually just a few weeks ago that really spurred me into action. And he said, I really am proud of you for your show and your podcast. And I love that you are having fun with it. But let's be real. This is a hobby. And the money, because we were talking about saving up for something to do to our house. And he said, just realize this is a hobby for you. You're not making any money. But if you're okay with that, then that's fine. And that
Mhm.
kind of like spurred something in me that moment. And I was like, this isn't just a hobby. I am earning some income with this, and I'm going to show him that I
Mhm.
am. And so I got really clear on what do I really need to do
Mhm.
to make this become this extra stream of revenue, not just a hobby.
Mhm.
So, and I did some things, and some things panned out, and not I'm not quite ready to share that yet, but I know you know what I'm talking about. I think if I give you the wink, and then and I will be announcing that soon. But um, it really kind of spurred me into action. And I thought, what am I
Mhm.
doing? And I go back to my mission of why I started the podcast and why I do create pod courses is because I want to make continuing education convenient and simple for our
Mhm.
colleagues. Like, I don't know about you, but if
Mhm.
I had to sit my butt in a chair for another 8-hour session of watching therapists up on a stage show me PowerPoint presentations, I'm gonna poke my eye out. Like,
It is funny you bring that up because that was you talk about some of your origin story that I've heard you
yeah,
talk about in this origin of
yeah.
the therapy show was being at the Low Country.
Mental health.
Was it called the Low Country
The
Symposium?
the Low Country Mental Health Conference, which is
Okay.
actually coming up in the summer, and they don't pay me a dime to talk about it, but I feel
Yeah.
like if I have
But
given them any
here's the funny
audience,
thing of I will say one of the effects of COVID
yeah.
was I didn't know I would miss over air conditioned
Mm-hmm.
conference room space like I do. I don't want to do it all the time. I
Right.
do like
Right.
being in person. I do
Right.
like, doing some in-person stuff, but there is the point that comes up, and depending on what state you're in,
Mm-hmm.
how many hours, like a friend of mine, he's in North Carolina and he has 40 hours he has to do per renewal.
Mm-hmm.
And he's binging stuff right now because his renewal's coming up and he's got to catch up on things. And this
Mm-hmm.
idea of like, and depending on what state you're in, you may have a lot of CEs to do.
Yeah.
And you may be interested in an in-person thing, but
Mm-hmm.
to not be that dependent and not be so to talk about the conversation, Lisa, the uh Bill O'Hanlon, he talks about and kind of what drives us forward. He said sometimes people say you follow your bliss, and sometimes that is a motivating factor. Like, this makes me so happy and so joyful, I want to do this. But the other thing Bill says is sometimes we're responding to the things that got us pissed.
Right.
And it's not always and like Bill O'Hanlon, he's taught he's been a significant teacher on Ericksonian hypnosis, and
Mm-hmm.
he was the co-founder of the solution-oriented approach to psychotherapy, to brief psychotherapy. And what got him as a teacher was he went to a presentation that was horrible and he had to pay for it. And this was back when he didn't have a lot of money. He had to drive to a different city to attend it. And he was so mad
Mm-hmm.
that led him to start doing his own stuff. And I'm not hearing, that level of anger to your husband's response, but there is this point of like, no, I feel like
Mm-hmm.
I want this to be something. Uh, and it is like, I'm amazed of how, different things motivate me in different ways. Like um, I've been really blessed and privileged in how stuff has grown for Psych Maven. And a lot of it I don't feel I can take credit for. I think a lot of it was timing that I didn't know was going to work out like it did.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it is finding good topics. Sometimes it was definitely connecting with good teachers and people that had audiences and uh but I do think that if there's something about it, it was the willingness to be flexible and to look at like what's working, what's not.
Mm-hmm.
There are courses I've created that I thought like, oh, this is gonna sell like hotcakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I get to it, I'm like, no, it didn't. and be willing to say like, okay, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and how to, and sometimes it involves doing stuff that's kind of boring. I'll give an example for this. So 2013 is when the DSM-5 came out.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I had been a few years in my CE business. And I knew that that was going to be, as that was published, going from the DSM-4 TR to the DSM-5,
Mm-hmm.
that there were going to be a lot of people looking for CEs on that.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife I'm not bad as a diagnostician, but my wife is very good at it. And I asked her if she would do it with me. I go, would you create a DSM-5 training with me? We created a 6 hour.
Wow.
And it's the most boring. I hate teach. I haven't taught it in years. And but here's the thing, like that year it came out, we taught it like 3 or 4 times. We got hired by conferences, like paid by conferences. We got brought into there was a medical college that hired us, and we taught it to 400 people. We did it as independent events. We made a lot of money off of that training.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it really expanded audience, because there were people that came to hear us speak that ended up then part of our email list and were aware of other trainings. And I don't regret doing that. Like it wasn't, this wasn't like, oh, my bliss is to teach about the DSM-5. It's like, no, I knew there'd be demand, and made a decision, and it was a good investment of time, and glad I'm not still doing it. But but yeah, um I don't think for anything there's, if you try anything and it ends up working out right away and it's easy, good for you.
Mm-hmm.
But that's hard to bank on.
Yeah.
Sometimes you try something and it didn't work, and you manipulate it a little bit, change it a little bit. Oh, it works a little better,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually it works.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but as you talk, Lisa, I think one of the biggest things I advise people in is the consistency.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to grow anything, be consistent.
Yeah.
And a mutual friend of Gordon and I, Gordon Brewer, who's the principal of the Sightcraft Network, he's the host of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Uh, Gordon and I have been friends for over 10 years, and I love telling the story how I met Gordon. Gordon was the first person that paid me money for a independent CE event I did. That's how we met.
Mm-hmm.
Was I was doing an ethics workshop. It was my first self-sponsored CE approved thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was an ethics topic. I did an ethics topic because I knew there would be a lot of people interested in that, because that's a required CE topic in my space. And I was just hustling. I was going on Psychology Today and individually messaging people, saying like, hey, I've got this. I wasn't spamming people. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, Lisa, my name's David. I see that you're in the Knoxville area. I've got this 3 hour workshop. If you're interested, would love for you to come.
Mm-hmm.
And Gordon lives about an hour and a half from me. And I almost didn't email him. I was just trying to find more people to message. And I thought, well, he's close enough. He may consider coming. And then I remember I was at I was in Hilton Head on vacation with my family, and my phone notification went off because my PayPal app, someone had bought something. And there was that first bit of excitement. It was L. Gordon Brewer Jr., who I had no clue who he was. But that's how Gordon and I met. We've been good friends in the years since. But Gordon started his podcast. I think it was in 2016, 2017. He started his podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me about it when he was starting it. And I didn't think much about it. I wasn't listening to very many podcasts back then. And I thought, well, good for you. I hope it's great. And for Gordon, he was just consistent. And I remember a few years later, we were checking in, and he was sharing with me some of his numbers. That he had just hit his like 100,000 download.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, how did you
Mm-hmm.
do this? And I realized for Gordon, it was just consistency.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I think that's a huge takeaway, is being willing to do that.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. It's his show is the consistency, it's the likability,
Mm-hmm.
it's the conversation. I mean, it's so many things. It's and almost like I was thinking about this. I was listening to his episode today, and it's the format is very consistent. Like I know what I'm going to get on the format of his show, and I like it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think about the other podcasts I listen to, it's a similar thing. Like I know the format, I like the
Mm-hmm.
format. It's just it's comforting almost after all these years of listening to him. It's pretty wild, actually,
Yeah.
then that you say that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, So for those who are considering this, and actually, uh, Lisa and I have something upcoming, and I will give you the quick link for it, and this can go in the show notes because this will be a redirect that everyone will be able to find. So you may be catching this live when Lisa and I do this. You may be catching it as a pre-recorded thing. But if you go to lisa.mavenwebinar.com, you'll be able to find, because Lisa and I are going to do a free training kind of talking about
Mhm.
some of this. And you may be listening to this in years in the future,
Yeah.
and or you may be catching it live, and we'll have more stuff coming up on that. But I like setting consistent links so people can find. So if you go to
Mhm.
lisa.mavenwebinar.com, you'll be able to find what Lisa and I are going to talk about and see anything. But you may have that in you.
Mhm.
You might have whatever you might have in you. You may be thinking about creating a group practice, or starting a podcast, or adding a consulting coaching piece, or you know what else do people do, Lisa?
You mean for extra income? Oh my
Extra
gosh.
income if you're a
Yeah.
therapist. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, course creation is another
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Coaching. Did you say coaching?
I think so.
Continuing
But
education
yeah,
creator. I
so
mean, all
if
that
continuing
stuff.
education, if that's what you want to do,
Hmm.
Lisa and I are going to be talking about it. But it is, it's fun. I like
Hmm.
it. There's all these side benefits to it.
Hmm.
Um, I was doing continuing education before as a group practice owner, but when I decided to start a group psychotherapy practice, having been a continuing education person in the community made it a lot easier. For one,
Yeah.
people saw me, rightly or wrongly,
Hmm.
as a expert,
Right.
um and so I had a certain credibility
Hmm.
uh that made people possibly more inclined to want to work with me. I had a referral base of other clinicians because I had a network of clinicians that I had a professional relationship with to be able to build a referral base. It was also a great way for me to hire
Hmm.
because I had a reputation in my community to do things. And so if you're already in private practice or group practice, it's beyond the money you can make from offering continuing education, it is a great anchor and marketing and building thing for other
Hmm.
things that you do.
Yeah.
If you want to present yourself as a kind of a, I don't like the term thought leader. It's very buzzy
Hmm.
as people talk about things.
Right. Yeah, but
But
it definitely puts you as an expert and an
yeah,
authority in your niche, or in your in the world that you,
yeah,
maybe you're like, what am I trying to say? Like the therapy that you do and the what your group practice is known for, it just
yeah.
helps. It helps you overall. And I want to piggyback on that, but I'm not in private practice, and I know I've shared with
Mhm,
my audience, I'm not in private practice, but it definitely adds to my credibility within my peers, my peer
mhm,
group locally. I've had people reach out to me that I didn't know, asking me about, MBCC, just a
mhm,
question about it, or do you think this would qualify, or how do you write objectives, or, have you, like, I want to do this, where do I even start?
mhm.
And I guess for it's really not that difficult. You go to the website, the MBCC, and you just look at what they need.
Yeah.
And I know you and I are going to talk about that in our webinar a good bit.
Mhm,
What that looks like, but yeah, it has helped my authority and credibility. What I love about it is I'm learning something. I get to
mhm,
connect with these amazing people who are so niche down into this one topic that they can talk at the very least of an hour
mhm,
about something, and I'm learning, and it's only helping me in my work, and it only helps me help my audience and my listeners, in their work. And I just absolutely love that it's making an impact on that level. And you can do it while you're on a walk. You can do it. You can listen while you're making dinner. You can listen while
mhm,
you're picking your kids up from school. You can listen on your lunch hour. I mean, I just love that it's audio,
mhm,
and you can listen to the content anytime for free. It's free. It's
mhm,
always free. And if you decide you want the CE hour, then you just go and purchase it.
mhm.
So I don't know. I love my model. I love the model that, I don't know if I've taken it from different people out there and pieced it together and made it my own, but I love my model. I love my
No, it
model.
is. It is. I think it's thinking about how people do things, and you talk about like the hard thing about most of my courses are video based,
Yeah.
but I've thought about what if I just created something strictly audio from that idea. The difficulty of a video based sort of thing is I have to sit and watch it
Mm-hmm.
versus I I don't typically just sit and listen to podcasts. It's not something I do while sitting. I do it while I exercise. I do it while I'm cleaning. I do it while I'm doing any number of other activities. While I'm doing yard work, when I'm doing that's when I listen to podcasts. And one of the big appeals of podcasts to me is it's the thing that's the accompaniment
Mhm.
of the rest of my life versus it needs this set aside time
Right.
for it.
Right.
And you know, to be everything to everybody isn't possible, but that doesn't mean you can't be something significant to somebody in
Right.
the things in their life. And uh you know, like I said, I agree. I wanted to, I was jealous you came up with it first, at least in the mental health space. And so I totally agree with you, Lisa. It's a great idea. And as far as people, and I'll give, you know, to talk about money for a second. We'll talk about money in the podcast, but to
Mhm.
talk about money, because people ask, because
Yeah.
I get asked a lot of it. I get similar questions like you know, say, Lisa, of how do I do this? Like, how do I, you know, whether it's a small thing, like how do I apply to NBCC versus like, how do I create a business in this? Or, but inevitably I'll get the questions like, can you make money at this?
Mhm.
And I'll tell people yes. Now, that doesn't mean I know plenty of people that don't. And there
Right.
are reasons why I don't think that they do. And I don't think it's all their fault.
Mhm.
I think sometimes we have some false ideas of how this works.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes we unfairly compare ourselves to, well, this is how this group does it, so I have to do it in the same way or I have to price it the same way. And it's similar to therapy. I know therapists that cost $60 a session, and I know therapists that are $250 a session.
Mhm.
And it's some people may say like, well, both are therapy. What's the difference? And there are differences, and so you
Mhm.
can make it work that way. But going back to I like I said, I run a decent sized group practice. They're definitely larger group practices, but you know, we're a decent size. And the gross revenue, if I compare my CE business versus my group practice business, the gross revenue of my group practice business is quite a bit more.
Mhm.
However, you know, that's the gross revenue then goes to pay for therapists, pay for a building, pay for all the things we pay for in that.
Mhm.
My profit margins on CEs is way better.
Right.
And if, you know, I love being able to be a part of a therapist community, and that's one of the reasons I love doing group practice. If I was just making a financial decision between Lisa, between you and me and everyone who's listening to this podcast episode, if I shut down my group practice, if I wanted to do that, I don't want to do that, but if I
Right.
shut down my group practice and put more hours into CE business,
Right.
um, I could make a significantly higher income than what I make now with the two combined.
Right. Yes, I know.
And some of it's just a factor of time. And I feel good about this being a part-time thing that I do.
Mhm.
But now, that doesn't mean you can make a great living overnight. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean that everything you do is going to just be amazing home run.
Mhm.
But if you're consistent, if you're curious, if you're willing to pivot,
Mhm.
it can be a great way to make a living, and one that has a lot of freedom.
Right.
I one of the things I do love about any online course or business is that um, I don't I can go weeks at a time without thinking about it if I choose to.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah,
Right.
or not completely, but close. That
Right.
I go on vacation. I went to I remember I was in the middle of a course launch and I went to Israel with my wife and my parents in 2019. And we were gone for about 2 weeks.
Mhm.
And I could check email and things like that. And I did have to respond to some like customer service sorts of things, not a lot. And it was great because I saw just sales come in. And it's one of the big things that people love about digital products, and that you'll hear the stories. And I love telling the stories. I love being on vacation
Right.
and making money.
I know.
It's a great
I
combo.
know. I know. When I'm on the weekend and I get a notification that I've sold a course, I'm just like, I almost like jump up and down because I mean, I'm just out living my life and I
Yeah.
created this thing months ago. And I really feel like I mean, that's the beauty of doing these online courses and digital
Mhm.
products. It's like, it takes work and it takes effort and it takes consistency. But once you get it up and running and the momentum kicks in and you're
Mm-hmm.
doing all the things consistently and you have patience, right? And you have the vision and you don't
Mm-hmm.
get distracted, it's totally doable. And that's one of the big reasons why when I knew that I was going to create the podcast and the pod courses, because at the same time I was thinking, do I also start private practice? I mean, that's why I didn't do the private practice, because I knew that was, I wanted the pod courses and the continuing education business to be the vision and the mission and the long term goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that if I tried to do private practice, I wouldn't have the time or the energy to work up to the
Mm-hmm.
consistency and the momentum and the intentional action that this whole thing has taken or is taking. And I love it now. I mean, I loved it when I started because I was so proud of myself for like figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
But it's as I've gotten going with it and continue to find just amazing people to talk to and, trainers to bring on. I now have people reaching out to me and,
Mm-hmm.
asking me, hey, I can talk about this. Is this something you think your audience would like? How does this work? How do we work together? Um, I really
Mm-hmm.
like what you're doing. Is there, how can I be a part of it? And that to me is just, I'm so grateful that
Mm-hmm.
I stuck with it and, kept going. And I love what you said about the being on vacation and getting that notification. I think that's for a lot of us now as I'm entering, a big 0 year. I'm entering the year of my 50th year on this planet. It's like, I want more of that in my life and less time of, I want more of that time freedom, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle freedom. And I really feel like continuing education courses, creating courses,
Mm-hmm.
podcasting, all of those things can lead to that for our colleagues. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you've said so many wonderful things in this episode, and I'm so excited for our webinar that's coming up. So do we want to share the title of that webinar?
Sure. Well,
Okay.
hopefully it's the same title because
Yeah.
we set a title the other day, and then we before we started recording, we are like, what do we call it?
Yeah.
Because we remembered what it was going to be about. But what do you have written down, Lisa? Because I
So
want.
you want to, okay, so I have down the 3 secrets to your first CE event. It's simpler than you think.
Yes.
Okay, great.
And that's what it is. And so we're going to be doing that live on May 11th.
Mm-hmm.
But or May 11, 2023,
Mm-hmm.
to be clear what year this is. However, if you go back, but it will be available because after we do it live, we're
Mm-hmm.
going to set this up as a free uh, uh, training that people can access.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if you go to the link, lisa.mavenwebinar.com. I talk about being frugal. This is a side note, but I talk about being trying to be frugal in my spending about doing trainings and things like that. And I've gotten pretty good at keeping things tight. I have a few exceptions though. I have so many web domains
Mm.
because what happens is I'll think of something
Yep.
and I want to like get,
Mm-hmm.
and so I have about 80
Yeah.
web domains. They're not all active websites, but it is, but I have so many things related to Maven because I came the name site Maven came to me. I know exactly where it was. I was driving back from a in-person conference. I was driving back from the Tennessee Marriage and Family Therapy Association annual conference in 2018, 2019, I guess it was, and it would have been 18. And I was driving back in pouring rain. And I was thinking to myself, I was in the continuing education business, but I'm like, I wanna do something that's more of a collective that has more people involved with it. Because before then it was mostly just me.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted something more collaborative. Like, what do I call it? And I was listening to audiobook, so similar to a podcast, but like audio Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point, which is one of my favorite books. I'd read it before, but he talks about mavens and this idea of a maven being this kind of an expert, but more of like this enthusiast,
Mm-hmm.
helpful enthusiast for something. And I came up with the idea of Psych Maven. And the first thought I had after I saw, oh, I love that name was, I hope the websites are available. And they were, and I have
You jumped on it.
.com, .org,
Yeah.
.net, and but but I but I have Maven Webinar, I have Maven courses. I do have the other reason I buy stuff is because every once in a while I'll have something because I have sold domains before because
Mm-hmm.
people will find something that I have and they're like, oh, I really want that. And if it's one I'm not using or don't think I will,
Yeah.
I've been
Just
able.
sell
I haven't made enough to justify what I spent
it.
on them, but
Right.
that's neither here nor there. That's just a fun, exciting thing for me. But um, going back to the passive income thing, Lisa, this is something I oftentimes people when they are imagining something like this, they have this idea of passive income and they have this
Mm-hmm.
idea of what this means.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe in passive income, but I do think people have misunderstandings of what passive is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't typically use the term passive income. What I use the term is invested income
Mm-hmm.
because it is work.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that the fruit of the work, like an investment, comes to you later, and you can work up front
Right.
and get it later. And one of my favorite business people to listen to is Pat Flynn of the Smart Passive
Yeah.
Income brand, Smart Passive Income podcast. And his slogan for his podcast, it's all about working hard now so you can sit back and reap the benefits later.
Yeah.
And if you want to do CE stuff, it will take you a lot of work, but you'll be able to reap benefits in an invested way later,
Right.
like being on vacation, like having
Mm-hmm.
uh you know, I have uh the Zapier thing set up in my phone when I'm in a course launch that it will do this cash register sound when people buy a course because that is a reinforcement thing that I love
Yeah.
getting. And I will have I'll be on vacation
Uh-huh.
and I'll have all my other notifications turned off. But that
That one.
because one, I have a hard time relaxing
Mm-hmm.
and that helps me actually relax. If I'm like laying by the pool or at the beach or on a hike,
Mm-hmm.
and my phone is telling me that, hey, you're relaxing, but you've invested time before, and so you can reap the benefit in this moment.
Right.
That actually helps me relax, and so
Yeah.
it's actually helpful for my self care.
Yep.
Is what I tell my wife when she's bothered when it irritates her how much my phone's going off.
That's so awesome. I love that. You're like, no, no, honey, it's meditation. It's
It
meditation
is.
for
It
me.
really is. It's like it's like those gongs, those
Yeah.
bells that people hit in meditation.
Right.
It's that cash register sound helps me relax because I feel like I've done work
Mm-hmm.
and it's okay for me to relax in this
Right.
moment.
I can kind of relate to that. Yeah.
Uh,
I can feel you on that. I'm really excited to be doing this webinar with you, and I'm excited to share the three secrets for the three secrets to your first CE event. It's simpler than you think. So you guys,
yeah.
we hope that you will join us May 11th, 2023. It's a webinar, but I'm guessing you can also listen to it while you're on a walk. You don't, I'm guessing you can
I will
do
do
that.
that. I don't
Okay.
typically here's the deal with that. I don't typically do that.
Mhm.
But because
That's
it's
my
your
model.
thing, it's your model. I'll make sure that we have that available as an audio download
Sweet.
for people. So
Awesome.
it can be bespoke
Hmm.
for the therapy show podcast.
That's so kind. That's so kind. And I do want to remind you guys that David does have some incredible trainings on his website. I was just on there the other day, and you've got some free stuff. You've got a free,
I do.
yeah. What's the free one again? It's
Right
at,
now, well,
it changes,
we
right?
have different one that changes, but depending on if you catch this soon, we've got um Bill O'Hanlon.
Mm-hmm.
We'll typically always have at least one free thing with Bill,
Mm-hmm.
and his thing right now, the time of recording is on utilization. It's called "There's No Such Thing as a Weed," which
Mm-hmm.
is about how to see kind of all things that clients bring as a positive sort of bit. Bill is mostly retired at this point. He splits his time three ways between his home in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
He works as a songwriter and he has a place in Nashville, and so he'll be in Nashville. And his partner has a home in Bon Air, and so she and Bill will go down, which is in the Caribbean, and so she and Bill will
Oh,
go down there.
nice.
And yeah, Bill like, has this like Lennon suit
Yes,
and Panama Jack hat, and I can tell where he is based on what
he's wearing.
his he'll post song videos on Facebook, and based on his background, I know where he
Yeah.
is. And but I play this game. It's like where in the world is Carmen for someone of a certain generation?
Yeah.
Where in the world is Carmen San Diego will make sense to you. If not, ask your parents.
Right.
They'll be able to that was. But I play the game. Where in the world is Bill Hanlon? But he still will do these free things, which I love
Mhm.
doing. But my free thing right now, it's a 1 hour ethics. It's the ethics of side gigs,
Nice.
which is kind of what
Nice.
we've been talking about
Yeah.
of I like side gigs, but there is ethical considerations if you're a therapist of
Yeah.
how you put things out into the world, to make sure that you're staying kosher with it. So I
Mhm.
always like to give people guidance with that, but it's a fun training.
Mhm.
And if that's not available, well, something will be free on Psych Maven's website. So you can
Yeah.
find us psychmaven.org is our main website. Or if you
Mhm.
go to psychmaven.anything for the most part,
You'll find it.
it
Yeah,
will
and
redirect to that website.
I'll definitely put the links in the show notes. So if you guys want to check out
Mm.
David's free offerings, if you want to sign up for our free webinar, May 11th, that will be there.
Uh-huh.
But gosh, thank you so much. I'm just so grateful that we are in each other's worlds, and
Yeah.
just it's been so much fun getting to know you, and we have a lot of fun
Yeah.
just chatting and in our Psycraft network too. So I just
Yeah.
enjoy being around you.
I've enjoyed that very much as well, Lisa, and I've enjoyed getting to know you. And I'm excited for you because I know it's a little under your hat right now, but you're at a great like crossroads
Yeah.
of whenever people and of that we talk about investment. You've
Mhm.
invested a lot of your time and mental energy, and you've
Mhm.
learned.
Oh yes.
And I think this next season for you is going to be super cool.
Well,
And
thanks.
and you will be able to have when you talk about doing things to your house, I don't know if it's a kitchen or whatever it is, but it would be really cool
Mhm.
that you're talking about this related to stuff you're doing because that this bathroom vanity, you'll be able to point, be like, this was
Mhm.
the fruit of this investment.
Mhm.
This was, and so it's cool to have as you have goals to
Yeah.
make it about tangible things because
Yeah.
then that tangible thing can be a reminder of the goal being met.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for that reminder. And for those of you who are wondering, it's actually a driveway. My husband is going. We're putting in a driveway. We haven't had one ever yet. So last night we were looking at his drawings of the different types of driveways, and so that's what's coming.
Okay.
I get a new
Is it
driveway. Woohoo!
Yeah, y'all don't have a driveway or you don't have a new driveway?
So we live in or like downtown Columbia, South Carolina. So there's a
Oh,
lot
so
of
it's the
like
older home,
yeah,
like,
it's
yeah.
like a bungalow style house,
Yeah.
and there might have been a driveway here at one point. I don't
Mhm,
know. We park kind of on the street in the drive.
mhm.
Like I don't know. It's hard to explain. Um, but he's gonna actually put. We're gonna pour concrete, have a driveway. We're gonna redo the landscaping of our front yard, all that. So that's
What you
coming.
need to have is you don't want to take up a lot because you don't want to mess up resale value, but get a little corner at the edge of the driveway
Uh huh.
and have a little stamp or something if it's concrete, a little just something
Oh, that
that's
says
kind of
paid for by the therapy show.
yeah, just a little. It could be small, of just like
Oh, hmm.
or just like or
Yeah.
even if it's underneath it and you just
Right.
know it's there.
Right. Yeah.
And because it is, I think part of what makes these things worth it
Yeah.
is of whatever side gig you may be thinking
Yeah.
about, whatever alternative stream of income, that when you're able to tie it to the tangibles in your life,
Right.
um, and that becomes whether it's just this idea of um quick story because I know we're trying to end, but I've got a friend of mine, he's got a really popular social media channel. He's got a sponsorship in it, and his sponsor just renewed, and so he took a group of us out to dinner to celebrate that. And it was very much like this was about
Hmm.
the work he put in to develop these relationships. So it was money, but it was this opportunity that he could treat his friends, and it be this like out of this the thing that he felt he had
Yeah.
in plenty in his life,
Yeah.
and to make it about these things that are really special for you. Anyway, I'm
Yeah.
I'm 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 going off on the sense of, but for me, I want to end on that because that's what makes these things worth it.
Right.
Money's
Totally.
fine,
Hmm.
but I think money's only valuable in as much as it translates into further investment in things in your life that really do matter to you.
Yes. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. You gotta have your why. Why are you getting into
Mm.
this? You gotta have your goals. You gotta have your
Yeah.
vision. I mean, all of these things are so important. And
Yeah.
so I hope you guys will join us May
Yeah.
11th. Hope you'll check out David's courses. And David, thank you again so much. It's just been awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. It's been a fun time talking to you.
Yeah, anytime. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine.
Be sure to visit lisamuster.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content.
And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.